Back when I was little, I used to think that the only way Santa Claus could make it through all the houses in the world on one night was by turning into some sort of amorphous blob and then oozing through the vent covers.
Turning himself into sort of this big blob and oozing through the vent covers.
You're a sick man, Ernest.
Jim Varney, for as far back as I can remember, the earliest time in my memory having seen an Ernest movie was Ernest Saves Christmas, and that was one of my favorite lines, the vent covers. He's always been one of my favorite actors. I am enamored by his energy and the story of how Ernest came to be. I live in the Northeast, and I wasn't really, one, I was too young. I hadn't been born at the time that he was doing a lot of the commercials for Ernest, so I didn't even know about that world. And two, I was outside of the market for a lot of the Southern commercials that Ernest was doing. And John Cherry, the man, the ad man, so to speak, but American film director who came up with the idea behind Ernest, along with his creative team. Anyway, all of this to say, I just finished reading these two incredible books about Ernest. One, Keeper of the Clown by John Cherry, the creator of Ernest, the ad agency behind the production, and a good friend of Jim Varney's. And then the other, The Importance of Being Ernest, written by Justin Lloyd, who is Jim Varney's nephew. I had wanted to read these for a while, and there's just so much wisdom filled in these books, and this all ties in with my own book about film and TV, Gophers. In some of the past videos I did in this little series about how I actually wrote and self-published my book, I mentioned that I would find other nonfiction books and read them, and not only look to see how they were published. In this particular instance, I believe these two were actually both self-published. I don't think they had a publishing house, either one, behind them, but it just goes to show you what kind of great stuff can come from self-publishing. Anyway, I would read the books and I would see other people's writing styles and try. These weren't the only two. I read a whole slew in a video I did for the literary agent I had at the time. I actually showcased a bunch of the books that I was reading and kind of gave, my idea was to give potential backers of the book. I was hoping they would see what I was going for. Robert Rodriguez's Rebel Without a Crew. In my previous video in this series, I mentioned Jenna Fisher's The Actor's Life. Books like that. And then you have books like these that just come along, and this is about a particular man and a memoir of that man's life and just the ups and downs. They're very heartwarming, and they're also very sad at the same time. Also, if you read, before the pandemic, I read this book on the subway, and this is how I like to read the book. I always hoped someone would walk by and say, "Oh wow, Jim." No, this never started a conversation. How did this never start a conversation? Anyway, I wanted to share a couple nuggets of wisdom from these books because I think Jim Varney's worth it. Physical comedy is a comedy that works in any language, and Chaplin knew that, Charlie Chaplin. His success was based on the fact that he never opened his mouth to get a laugh. I think people like physical comedy, which is why cartoons are so successful. I try to make Ernest clownish, and I don't want him too low-key, and he's physically funny. Jim never felt playing the fool was beneath him. He took satisfaction in the fact that many actors would not be fearless enough to be so outrageous or look so silly. He also thought he was excelling in a type of acting that was more difficult than many assumed. In a 1987 television interview with WKBW out of Buffalo, New York, Jim said, "You can do a dramatic scene 14 different ways. If you don't tell a joke the right way, if the punchline's timing is off, it's not funny." When Jim went into one of his characters, he was that character. Often I had to snap him out of it. We would be shooting a scene and I would yell, "Cut, cut, cut, stop, Jim, we're through." That total concentration is what made those characters so believable. After reading these two books, really what I learned is that not a lot of people, I think not enough people, give credit to Jim for being what a lot of his close friends and family considered him to be, close to or at the level of a genius. Comedic timing was second nature to him from birth, but his life was also, stricken with a lot of problems. You learn a lot about his family and the way his upbringing was not quite normal. His mother had a lot of mental health issues, but you find things that you can associate with and that inspire you in your own way. So whatever kind of book you might be working on, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, I am a firm believer that by reading those types of books, you are only help bolstering yourself in writing the best book you can. I caution other people, and I also distance myself from books that were about being a production assistant, because again, my book is about being a production assistant. There existed a few others, and I didn't want to let any of those subconsciously influence my writing. So I didn't really read too much at all, if anything, on being a production assistant. What I did read was other books in the showbiz industry, and sometimes I would find a golden little nugget of wisdom about production assistants, like happened in John Cherry's book. Basically, they built an authentic African village set in Africa when they were filming Ernest Goes to Africa, one of Ernest's last movies. They were filming with some real Zulu cast members, the African tribe Zulus, and in the natural state, John Cherry writes, a breast would sometimes creep out of a halter and hang there, looking back at our cameras. Ernest Goes to Africa was a family feature, so I had to put our production assistants on boob watch. When a runaway boob escaped its costume, it was rarely corrected unless one of our production assistants asked for it to return to its default position. I guarantee you nowhere in my book are you going to find a story about how I was ever put on boob watch. I like to think what Gophers has done or is doing for the production assistant community. One of the books about PAs, I'm not the best, but one of the books about PAs helps shed the light on that nonfiction, very real job, is similar to what other books I read did. For example, Justin Lloyd and John Cherry, what they did for Jim Varney's memory, and these books did for the Ernest fan community. And by the way, both excellent reads. I highly recommend them. I'm going to leave links to them in the video description in case you're interested. There's also a great, apparently, the Justin Lloyd's is being made into a documentary film. I'll leave that link in the description too, so if you're interested, be sure to check that out. All of this to say, there's so much more that could be said about Jim Varney, and I'm very excited to keep learning about his memory. Writing my book and finding his books was one of the things that motivated me to do that. So a lot of good can come out of writing your own book. Stay tuned for more videos like this, and feel free to comment any questions about self-publishing that you may have. Be well.